Welcome to the second video of our 600-kilometre adventure, cycling out the Royal Canal, up to Shannon, down through Maynooth to the Grand Canal and then back to Dublin. I camped on the canals as I was doing it, but here we are leaving Duke's Harbour in Maynooth. That's the Duke of Leinster it's named after, and the wall alongside us here is the wall of the old campus, which is basically the religious college, and I think that's the cemetery in particular that's on the other side of the wall. Now Maynooth is going to be the last town of significance that we hit until we reach Mullingar, and this is very different cycling from yesterday's video where we left the centre of Dublin and cycled through the north inner city up past Cabra on our way out. Yesterday was quite urban, today is going to be much more rural. It's mostly going to be fields and interrupted now and again by these old bridges and lock gate systems. I believe there was about 79 locks altogether on the Royal Canal as it makes its long journey to the Shannon, but today we're going to include a section called the Long Level where, because of engineering brilliance, there's no locks for 32 kilometres. Now you can imagine if you're trying to navigate a canal boat, then each lock really slows you down, so that speeds it up. Coming up to this section now to Kilcock, this is one of the first places where you could probably stop for a coffee, or indeed I stopped for a meal coming on the way back in, and also where on this day I hit a little bit of rain. Kilcock itself is probably 12th century, goes back to the 12th century. Used to have as a market town, and the name comes because of some saint who was there. A lot of place names end up having relationships with saints. We are leaving the Pale here, and the Pale was the limit of English settlement in Ireland up until the medieval period. The Normans, of course, did have castles and things outside the Pale, but this was really where the boundaries of Irish and English culture separated. So just a kilometre or so west of Kilcock, along the canal, there's a little space where it opens. There's a picnic bench and some grass. And I stopped here for a bite to eat and coincidentally ran into somebody I knew and hadn't seen in about a decade. But he says you regularly see people camping here. It's quite close to Dublin. We're only about 31 kilometres out. But possibly if you're coming off a ferry or something like that, it could be quite useful. Of course, it's also the case that if you're coming into Dublin trying to catch a ferry, this spot near Kilcock is probably a good spot to stop at. You're only about an hour and a half from the ferry terminal at that point, and you're a safe distance out of Dublin. Really don't want to be wild camping in the middle of cities. Generally not a good idea. I do a lot of wild camping on these trips, and that's because accommodation in Ireland is pretty expensive, but also there's often nowhere suitable in terms of the distance you're covering in particular days, particularly if you're going through the Midlands and particularly if you're doing things on short notice. So it's a way of making things more affordable. As you'll see, I kind of break that up with hotel stays, particularly if the weather is a bit rough. On this trip though, I did mostly wild camp along the canals and then along the River Shannon, and I'll talk a little bit about those at each of my stops, and also in fact a couple of previous stops I have used on the canal. My experience of it is been pretty good. I did have a slightly suspect incident towards the end of this particular trip, so I'll be talking about that when we get to that, and the night before I got back to Dublin, but there's a story there that you'll hear later on. For now, this part of the canal is going through little patches of woodland. You're a little bit back from the canal at times, but you're pretty much on the canal bank. Lots of nice kind of places to stop for a break, just stop and sit, take in nature and enjoy the sounds of everything going on around you. I would say there are three essential standards of behaviour for cyclists who are wild camping. One, leave no trace. As soon as you move off, there should be no indication you were ever there. And if possible, take some of the litter that's often somewhere with you, so it's better than when you arrived. Secondly, just use spaces from dawn to dusk, particularly on the canals. This is a recreational area for lots of people. You don't want to be in the way. So, set up towards dusk. Be gone soon after dawn. Again, people won't even know you were there. And thirdly, you will run into dog walkers and joggers and early morning people and late evening people in particular. And just remember, this is their space. It's the place they're probably coming every evening, particularly if you're male. They might be a little bit nervous about you. It's no harm to be friendly and say hi, but don't pay too much attention to people as they stroll past unless they want to interact with you. Again, most of my experiences have been really good. People have been friendly, they're chatty, they're interested in where you're going, where you're coming from, and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's the most common experience people have with cyclists and hikers who are wild camping around the place. And it's why, although it's often not strictly legal in places, it is very, very widely tolerated across Ireland. I do have a video actually on wild camping. I talk about some of the legalities of that, some of the technical difficulties, so have a look at that if you haven't done it before. Cloncarry and Old Town, which is the area we've just been passing through, has an old Norman moat and bailey. There's also a ring fort there, and there's a few other bits where I don't have time to put into this video, but I'll be posting those to my TikTok account, also eBike Touring Life. I post similar content to Instagram, and we're just passing through Enfield here. Enfield's old name would have been Enfield, and basically because it was one of the locations of the inns that were about every 10 kilometres on the road that ran from Dublin over to the west of Ireland. In this region, we're also hitting the first of the Midland bogs, the raised bogs that dominated most of the Midlands in Ireland, but a lot of which have now been drained. As we go further along, though, we're going to run into a couple of spots where there are bog conservation projects in an attempt to save what's left of those particular bogs and maybe even restore some of the periphery to them. There is some controversy around that, and once we get to the Shannon, we'll pass a couple of bogs that I think were probably being illegally worked as I went by, and I'll talk about that when we get to those spots. But it's a great way of actually seeing the bogs of Ireland. On either of the canals, they both had to cross the bogs. Those were both, as you might imagine, quite big engineering challenges in themselves, but it gives you easy access to them. And it's quite impressive, the scale of the work that's required in terms of the restoration of those boglands. Almost as impressive as the original engineering that was required to build a canal through a bog, because that is not simple at all. The canals have got to remain with a clean separation from the bog so they remain navigable, and you're basically trying to put a waterproof layer in between between water and water-soaked ground. Quite a bit of a challenge in itself, and we may get to talk about some of those, but here is one of the real engineering masterpieces.
This stretch of the Royal Canal is called the Long Level, and that's because there's 32 kilometres of it without a single lock gate. And the reason that's possible is because of this bit here, which is the Blackwater Aqueduct. So it's hard to get from the position I'm in now, but basically the River Blackwater is down below us, I think about 10 metres, and the canal is being carried across the Blackwater and indeed across this entire valley on the same level. So that's why there's not any need for lock gates. Quite a bit of engineering from about the 1790s.
And as we marvel at the technological masterpieces that the canals were in the time, it's also worth remembering the vast amount of human labour involved in their construction. It's estimated there were 30,000 people working on building the canal at any one time as it made its way over County Kildare.
Just stopped for dinner at Fury's there across the road. It's directly on the route, basically, as you come up the bridge, and then you're heading off down the side of the pub. Got a steak sandwich and chips and a pint of Guinness for €25. Really busy, actually. I was lucky they could serve me.
We know very little about that 30,000 workforce that built the canal, because at this point in history most ordinary workers could not read, they could not write, they could not leave their own records. So all we have is the engineers' reports and the canal board meetings and that sort of thing. But these people were immersed in the society of their time, in the struggles of that society, and those struggles are reflected in the stories of the canals.
So I'm standing on Ribbontail Bridge. I was curious about the name and also the structure of it. As you can see, it's a very narrow pedestrian bridge, originally built when the canal was built, so that the locals could continue to access the local church. And the name Ribbontail apparently comes because it was also used as a sort of secretive meeting point by the ribbonmen, which were one of those agricultural societies, early unions, I guess you could say, that campaigned against landlordism, and also in their case against the fact that Catholics were expected to pay a tithe to the Anglican Church at that time. But in this area as well, according to mythology or local history, the ribbon men during the Great Famine would knock holes in the sides of the canals to create work, because then they would have to be plugged up again. It's quite precarious to walk on. I'm kind of walking up it. I was up in the middle of it. There was a little bow with it, and I was thinking, you know, this is probably the original structure. So it's probably something like 230 years old. I'm sure they've done restoration work on it though. Local historians also record hostility to the canal in general, which is kind of funny in relation to opposition to some of the greenways being constructed. Anti-canal feeling ran high in the early days amid fears that the canal would bring in thieving, undesirables and carry away locals and their livelihoods. Ribbonmen would pelt the barges from the bridges with stones and filth. This is the second aqueduct on the long level, and it's the one for the River Boyne. Now, it's got a higher wall, so it's probably hard to see just how far the Boyne is below this, but I'd say it's a good 10 metres, maybe a bit more. And like the previous aqueducts, the purpose is to allow the canal to proceed with no locks for 32 kilometres in the long level, as it's called. But because it's crossing river valleys while doing that, it has to be built high above the valleys, including high above the rivers where it crosses them. One of the first breaches of the long level was back in 1811, and that's when there was a potato famine in the region, and the locals feared that the canal would be used to transport potatoes out. However, the most recent breach, and it was a very major one, was back in 1993. Not quite sure what happened, but I think that was entirely accidental. But that actually was one of the biggest canal restoration projects that was needed in modern times because of it. And there are ways of putting barriers in at those aqueducts to stop too much water loss if breaches happen in future. Leaving the river valleys behind, this next section of the long level is crossing a sequence of flat bogs, the first of them being Mullingar bog, which is in this area and is probably the easterlymost bog of significance in Ireland. Ireland has 50% of the total land area of bogs in the European Union, so preservation falls on us fairly heavily. Stopped for a pint at the wonderfully named Hill of Down, which is about 10 houses and a pub. A very basic pub, but it has good Guinness, so that would be all you'd want. And also, it's actually got a very good side of the canal beer garden. But just don't be expecting mussels or anything like that. The Ribbontail cottages back at the harbour were built in 1795 and the Boyne Aqueduct completed 1803, so it's probably a reasonable guess to say this part of the canal was being worked on in 1790. Huge rebellion that shook Ireland in 1798 is connected more with the Grand Canal than the Royal Canal. It had reached Enfield by that stage and was being used by the rebels to smuggle arms and by the Brits to transport soldiers and also French prisoners of war who were apparently brought back after the Battle of Balnamuck on canal barges. Locals gathered to watch them pass and apparently they sang the Marseillaise, so it's certainly quite a scene you can imagine, particularly if you've seen Casablanca and the restaurant scene in that. I'll be returning to 1798 and the canals a couple of other times, but for now I want to talk about Mount Heavy Bog here, which we are passing through. We talk about the restoration of the canals, but the other thing that's happening alongside the canals is the restoration of the bogs, and this is one example of this. Look at all the construction work that's necessary in order to try and re-wet this particular Midlands bog. You hear about these projects, but when I read the report on it online, I'll add a link to it in the video description, you can't help but be impressed at the amount of effort that's going in. And like the canals, which you see and you think, oh, this is the way it's always been. Nope, it's some serious work is being put into maintaining these, bringing those bogs back to life and restoring them. And with Ireland holding 50% of Europe's bogs, that makes a lot of sense. We are now approaching Thomastown Harbour, which marks the end of the 32-kilometre long level, and now there's a sequence of 8 lock gates in I think just 3 kilometres that brings us up to the final top level of the canal, which is known as the summit level, that extends all the way through to the water feeding point at Mullingar. Not intending to use this myself on this trip because I'm still going to make some distance tonight, but lock 21, which is I think about
15 kilometres from Mullingar, has a boarded up lock cottage, but there's quite a lot of space, so it would be a spot, quite a comfortable spot, I think, if you wanted to camp. Now there is a road running alongside it. I'm not quite sure how many houses are on this, but it's probably only a handful. So you could set up across from the road using that lock gate as a bridge, and you'd be grand, I'd say.
There's actually a few other spots on this stretch where there's the multiple locks where you could probably camp as well. This area of the canal, there's not much in the way of population along it. The next big town basically is going to be Mullingar. Now the approach to Mullingar itself is going to go through another deep sinking, so there's not so many spots along that, but there are spots out the other side. Now on this particular tour, I was making a big distance the first day, so actually I'm going to be going all the way to Ballinaccarrigy Harbour, which is where I camped for the night. But I've camped along the canals at several spots. I'll show you another one just the other side of Mullingar over the last couple of years as I've travelled them. And if you're a regular follower of the channel, you know I have wilds camp in many different locations as I cycled around Ireland. I also stay in campsites and I do some nights in hotels and B&Bs. And indeed, tomorrow night is going to be one of those, because although the weather here is looking lovely, it's going to turn very nasty tomorrow afternoon. I'm also going to be in for a bad night's sleep, but all that is going to be a story I'll tell you as we go along, and also a bit of a wild camping horror story is going to end this sequence of videos as I come back on the Grand Canal and things go a bit wrong. There's a couple of old abandoned bridges as you go along here, and I think the reason they're abandoned is because there's a bit of the land that you're seeing on the other side of the canal here is actually got the motorway and the national road on the other side of it, so it's quite pinched off. So whatever that was giving access to, probably a village or something, is no longer doing that. So we're now Ballinaccarrigy Bridge, and the section of the canal from here to Mullingar is going to be another one of these deep sinking sections. I haven't managed to find any information about this particular one. You can see the canal is again cut below the level. Apparently they were again cutting through limestone, and I know Mullingar Harbour was made out of limestone, so very possibly they were able to quarry the stone here and then use it to build the harbour. But I've not been able to confirm that. There is a book on the Royal Canal that was written in the 1960s that I've seen referenced a couple of times, but I haven't yet managed to obtain a copy. So that's something I'm going to be looking out for. Perhaps in future videos I'll be able to throw in some more detail based on that. Keep an eye on my TikTok and Instagram accounts, also eBike for Touring Life, where I post live footage as I cycle routes. So if I find that book and the next time I'm doing this route, I'll be posting extracts directly to there. YouTubes take a bit longer to put together, as you might imagine. These tend to happen months after I've actually done the cycle. So you're getting different content basically on both. So approaching Mullingar. Mullingar probably translates as the left-handed mill. Supposedly a 7th century saint reversed the flow of direction of the local mill, and the harbour got here in about 1808. Now if you look at Google satellite view and zoom out, you'll see Mullingar is basically the dry point in a landscape of bogs and no less than 5 limestone lakes that surround it. So it's a very natural point to be trading through. Our light here has changed because on this trip I popped into Mullingar to get a Chinese and rejoined the route further out. Basically in our next video we'll be coming in there, so I pulled some old footage from a previous trip. But yes, the next video is going to be going from here all the way down to Abbeyshule over the Aqueducts and camping the night on the way down. So if you haven't subscribed already, be sure to. Hopefully this all inspires you, and perhaps someday I will see you on the road.